Hey, Brooke here. Imagine experiencing the world without thinking about it. No inner voice, no reflection, no sense of you watching what's happening. Just reactions, just feelings. And for most of human history, this was enough, until at some point, something shifted. A human experienced something more than just a reaction or a feeling, a thought, not just seeing the world, but noticing that they were seeing it. Because at some point, humans stopped just existing and actually started thinking about their existence. For most of human history, if you go back far enough, life wasn't something you reflected on. It was something you moved through. You responded to hunger, to danger, to whatever was directly in front of you. You didn't sit and wonder what it all meant. And you definitely didn't question your identity. You simply just were. Imagine moving through life like you're an NPC. Pure bliss. But then, something changed. Not all at once, and not in a single moment, but gradually. Gradually, the human brain developed what psychologists now call metacognition, the ability to think about your own thoughts. And that sounds simple, but it isn't. Because the moment you observe your own thinking, you're no longer just experiencing reality, you're interpreting it. The idea that this shift happened is often linked to what historian Yuval Noah Harari calls the cognitive revolution, a period roughly 50 to 70,000 years ago when human behavior began to change in ways that are difficult to ignore. Suddenly, there's evidence of symbolic thinking, cave art, more complex tools, early forms of communication that go beyond immediate survival. Something in the human mind became more flexible, more abstract, which suggests that humans weren't just reacting anymore, they were imagining. And imagination changes everything, because the moment you can imagine something that isn't there, you can think about the past, you can anticipate the future, you can create meaning where there isn't any. You can also worry, plan, regret, and question. In other words, the first thought a human had may not have been about survival at all. It might have been something much simpler, or much stranger. Something like, what is this? Or the more unsettling, what am I? It's difficult to picture what that would feel like, because you've never not had that ability. Your brain is constantly building an internal model of the world, a running interpretation of what's happening, why it's happening, and where you fit into it. This idea is closely tied to modern theories of predictive processing, developed by neuroscientists like Carl Friston, which suggest that your brain is less of a passive observer and more of an active predictor, constantly guessing what reality is going to be and adjusting when it's wrong. But early humans didn't always have that abstraction. There was likely a point where the brain could perceive the world, but not yet reflect on it. And somewhere in that transition, something clicked. One of the closest modern frameworks for understanding this comes from psychologist Julian Jaynes, who proposed the bicameral mind theory. Jaynes suggested that early humans may not have experienced conscious thought the way that we do now. Instead, decisions and behaviors may have felt more automatic, or even external, like instructions rather than internal reflections. Whether or not that theory is entirely accurate, it points to something important. Conscious thought, as we experience it, wasn't always there, and that means the first real thought wasn't a sentence or even a fully formed idea. It was likely something much more basic, a realization, a shift from seeing something to recognizing it. And you can experience a version of this today, when you suddenly become aware of something that was always there, like the electrical hum of the TV, thinking about involuntary responses like blinking or breathing, or the fact that you're even thinking at all. Nothing has changed, but something feels different. That shift, awareness itself, is surprisingly difficult to define, but it sits at the center of what makes human thinking human. And once that ability exists, it doesn't stay small. It expands from what's happening to why is this happening, and eventually to one of the most uniquely human realizations. This will eventually end. At some point, humans didn't just live, they understood that they were going to die. Anthropologists often point to burial rituals as evidence of this shift, suggesting that early humans developed not just awareness, but meaning. From that point on, thinking became more complex, more abstract, and a little inconvenient. Because the same ability that allows you to reflect, imagine, and understand the world is also the reason you can overthink something at 2 a.m. It's the reason you replay conversations, question decisions, and worry about things that haven't even happened. Your brain is incredibly good at simulating reality, sometimes a little too good. And this brings us back to the idea of predictive processing. According to this framework, your thoughts aren't just reacting to the world, they're constantly trying to anticipate it. Your brain builds models, fills in the gaps, and tries to make sense of incomplete information, which is incredibly useful for survival, but it also means your experience of reality is never entirely direct. It's constructed, interpreted, filtered. So when you think about the first thought a human had, it likely wasn't clear or even correct. It was uncertain. A first attempt at understanding something far more complex than the brain was fully prepared for. And in a way, that hasn't really changed. Your thoughts still work like that. They feel clear and intentional, but underneath, they're built from uncertainty, patterns, predictions, and assumptions. And there's also something slightly strange about this when you slow down and really look at it. Because your thoughts feel like they belong to you. Like you're choosing them, guiding them, deciding what comes next. But most of the time, they just appear. You don't sit there and consciously decide what your next thought will be. You just notice when it arrives, which raises a slightly uncomfortable question. If you're not choosing your thoughts before they happen, where are they actually coming from? Neuroscientists often point out that a lot of brain activity happens before you're consciously aware of it. In other words, your brain is already doing things before you even know about it, which suggests that what you experience as thinking might be less like creating thoughts and more like observing them, which means the first human thought wasn't just the beginning of intelligence as we know it today. It was the beginning of interpretation, the beginning of existence outside of just existing. And maybe that's why this feels so deep, because the first thought wasn't just a moment. It was a transition from just experiencing the world to wondering about it. And the cool thing, we'll always be in that process, the process of evolving consciousness. Every time something makes sense and then it doesn't. Every time you become aware of something that you weren't aware of before. Every time you think, wait, what? If you've made it this far, you've probably had a few thoughts of your own while watching this. Some useful, some less so. But either way, that's kind of the point. Liked what your weird brain just learned? Hit subscribe. If not, that's okay. I'll just be over here having a thought about why you didn't.